It's Searching for Answers. Welcome back. We look forward so much to our devoted and faithful viewers making a point of joining us for these conversations. We almost kind of think we can see you through the camera lens there a little bit, and we envision you with your Bible or Bibles or translations, whatever works for you, English or other. If you have several versions to compare, all the better. This is the program where we dig into the text, roll up our sleeves, reverently and respectfully, but also with a great deal of curiosity about how the text can shine a light on our spiritual growth as we walk the pathway of Christian pilgrims. And it's that pathway that's front and center in this book that we're going through right now. The letter, we call it the letter, the sermon to the Hebrews. The Hebrews now meaning Christian disciples who have appropriated all of the promises that have gone before. And we're in chapter 6, the last half or so of the chapter, where that promise moves right front and center in the central stage, because we are told that right here, God makes a promise to Abraham and thereby makes a promise to us. Us includes not only those of us on this side of the camera lens, but each of you as well. So Dr. Leo Ranzelin, a New Testament scholar and Associate Dean of the faculty in the School of Religion here at Loma Linda University. Dr. William Johnson, New Testament scholar who has spent much of his life, I think, digging into this book and living with it. Many of you know him most recently, the editor-in-chief of the Adventist Review. We're just so glad that he's able to join us for this series of conversations on this book that means so much to him and to all of us. Dr. Bernard Taylor, an Old Testament scholar, who knows a whole bunch about the New Testament as well, but who helps us recapture something of the background as we read, particularly in this book, that builds so carefully and so perceptively on the Hebraic background of the Christian experience. And so here we are. We have been looking at chapter 6, God making that promise to Abraham, verse 13 and following. And the point of it all, finally, is that this promise is sure. You can count on it. God speaking in his own voice and thereby swearing by himself. God, the God who never proves false, but always true, has promised to Abraham and thus to us that he will bless us and multiply us. And so let's pick up again. Leo, let me invite you to read again. We looked at this last time, but take us down through that entire last paragraph, if you would.
6:13 through 20?
13, right down to the end of the chapter.
For when God made a promise to Abraham, since he had no one greater by whom to swear, he swore by himself, saying, surely blessing, I will bless you, and multiplying, I will multiply you. And so Abraham, having patiently endured, he obtained the promise. For men swear by someone greater than themselves, and an oath given for confirmation is to them an end of every dispute. And so when God wanted to show more convincingly to the heirs of the promise the unchangeable character of his purpose, what does he do? He guaranteed it with an oath. So that by two unchangeable things, in which it is impossible for God to lie, we who have taken refuge would have strong encouragement to grasp, to take hold of the hope set before us. Such hope we have as an anchor of the soul, both firm and steadfast, and which enters into the inside of the curtain, where Jesus has entered as a forerunner on behalf of us, having become a high priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek.
A lot of things to unpack here. And the logic is tightly woven,
Yes.
isn't it?
If you don't mind me just
No,
saying one more thing on
by all
top of
means.
this, because one of the things I try to do is ascertain the social setting. What is the real condition of this audience? And it seems to me that this preacher, this homiletician, has looked at, and I see this in verse 6:10, that perhaps some are thinking that God has overlooked their work, that he has overlooked the love that they have shown for his name, and has overlooked the fact that they've ministered to the saints and are continuing to do so. And so it seems to me he wants to impress anew upon this church the faithfulness, steadfastness, perseverance of God now. And what better way to do that than to go back to the all-star of Israel's scriptures, Father Abraham, and speak of the promise and the oath that was given to him. And I think in his eyes, that's going to be an extraordinary example of the faithfulness and steadfastness of God's promise.
Therefore, we seize the hope.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. We seize it. We
Take hold of it.
Take hold of it. That's really what it means, isn't it? Yeah. Right. Yeah. So this is not grounds for kind of slovenliness or wavering. We have this hope, of course, famous words in our tradition, drawn out of verse 19 here, sure and steadfast, right?
And for a Jewish Christian audience to go back to Abraham and say, wow,
As the
God did this, right,
the ultimate
did this for
authority, wasn't it?
Abraham.
Yeah.
How remarkable
And
is
so
that?
we get it too. What an honor in a way, isn't it? Right. Yeah.
In 18 and 19, I can't help noticing the word hope 3 times.
Yeah.
Okay? 18, to seize the hope set before us. And then 19, we have this hope. We have this hope. A sure and steadfast anchor of the soul, a hope that enters the inner shrine behind the curtain. So, while we're on this earth, we live by hope. Okay? We are pilgrims. We're on the way. We haven't arrived yet. But hope makes the realization of the promise sure. Our faith is grounded in Jesus, and that hope is an anchor to our souls.
This is why one of our good perceptive viewers a while back picked up that we had mentioned that this is as much a sermon as anything else, and he said, "Well, I'm not arguing with you, but on what grounds do you make that?" And I would say it's cadences like this, where you see the hope, the hope.
Yeah.
Now you can write it that way too, but writing it comes out of preaching it like that. I think finally, doesn't it?
Right.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think, Bernard?
I'm taken with verse 19. We have this hope, a sure and steadfast anchor of the soul, a hope that enters the inner shrine behind the curtain. Remember back in chapter 4, let us come boldly to the throne of grace.
Yeah.
And hope motivates us, not fear. There's not a matter of having to do all of these things and maybe I'll be acceptable. To boldly come into the throne, because that's where you go when you're in our condition, and there is a solution, there is a remedy, there is a place to go within the veil, within the curtain, the inner shrine behind the curtain.
Yeah.
The word hope. Can I say another word or two on that?
Sure.
Yeah.
In today's world, well, I hope so, It's become a sort of a weak word,
Right.
Maybe, I hope so. But this is not the hope of the book of Hebrews, not the hope of the New Testament. The hope of Christians in the New Testament is a sure thing.
Right.
It's something that is absolutely guaranteed. It's not an optimism, not whistling in the dark. It's an anchor of our soul. Why? Because of Jesus. He guarantees our hope.
It's the flip side of certainty.
Yeah.
Because of the certainty, it's a real hope. It's not a wish,
Right.
but a certainty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you almost could. I mean, in a paraphrasing way, we have this certainty. You
Yes.
could just about
Yes.
translate it that way,
Yeah.
couldn't you, in this particular place.
There's no doubt about the future. so far as God is concerned. The doubt is whether we might fall by the wayside. That's the only doubt, not with God.
And it seems to me this passage underscores the fact that this pilgrimage, this journey to the heavenly country, what we should always keep before us is this living hope of an eternal inheritance that we will someday have. And I don't know if any of you have heard of this book by Viktor Frankl, I think it is, Man's Search for Meaning.
Yes.
I read through it many years ago. And the thing that I was struck with, the point that he made in the book, was that when he spoke of the Holocaust and the tragedy and the awfulness of all that, those who survived had some sense of hope and how crucial survival was in being related to having some notion of hope.
Yeah.
And human experience demonstrates that. And it seems to me this homily here underscores the importance of having a living hope to live a full and vibrant Christian life.
Yeah.
It's interesting in this context, you mentioned the Holocaust. Holocaustos, of course, is the Greek word for a whole burnt offering, which is part of the sanctuary system. And the Jews described themselves in that way because they felt that they were sacrifice to God. And here we are drawing upon the sanctuary imagery. I've often thought it in the history of the putting the New Testament together, as you mentioned earlier, the book of Hebrews was a late entry. And I often think, what a difference, especially if we'd gotten Hermas instead of Hebrews. The shepherd of Hermas, I mean, it would have been about 3 times as long as it is now. But here we have this incredible book, and it applies to a particular audience and insights that would not otherwise be possible and could easily not have been recorded and preserved.
Yeah.
We're going to find ourselves getting increasingly into the notion and the theme of priesthood now as we move ahead.
Right.
But once again, the author is at pains to characterize this priesthood in a unique way. It's not the priesthood of Aaron, it's the priesthood of Melchizedek. What can you tell us about that name, Bernard? Anything in particular?
Melchizedek, as it's understood here, is a combination of 2 Hebrew words. Melech is king, and Melchi is the particular construction that's used, and Tzedek and its companion Tzedekah are words for righteousness. So he's king of righteousness.
Or righteous king, if you wanted to flip it around.
Righteous king.
And he's also the king of Shalem, of peace as well.
Yes, yes.
So we've got 3 themes going here. We've got hope, we've got righteousness, we've got peace. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Bill, you've mentioned before that many religions in the world have priests, priestly functionaries of one kind or another. And there's always a danger that some people might think, well, priests are not a caste of people whom I particularly respect. But maybe that's part of what's going on here with this unique designation.
Yeah, I think so. Because according to the reasoning of this book, there's really only been one true priest, high priest. Now, even though there are people, have been and still are people on earth who call themselves priests, there's really only one. The one who is both fully God and truly human. Okay? So he is the bridge between heaven and earth. In himself, he is. And Hebrews has set that up in the opening chapters, first couple of chapters. And then it goes on to talk about the work he does as priest. And that is a unique work. Anyone else who takes the name priest really, well, I have a problem with it because there's only one, and that's Jesus himself.
It's convenient and helpful that Psalm 110 is able to give our author here some ammunition on the matter, because there you have that citation. You are a priest forever, a Melchizedek type of priest,
Yeah.
you know, unique. Melchizedek is a bit of a mystery. We don't know where he comes from, or we don't have much background on him. And yet in that enthronement psalm, in Psalm 110, it's a praise of the king who is being ensconced again for another year of rulership. And it's a kind of a chant or a hymn of honor and praise. You are not only the king, but you are a priest.
Now that's something different.
And it's different, yeah.
Because there
right.
was the kingship and there was the priesthood.
Yeah, two different things.
But now we have them coming together in one person. That's different.
Yeah, that is unique, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so this too adds, I think, a note of certainty, security, assurance in what God has done through Christ for us, because this particular title is so special and carries so much weight that it's one more way of saying, don't think that this is something you can shrug off, right? This is something for real, and it's sure. And even though it was first given to other people, now it's your turn.
Right.
You stand in the place now and inherit this if you're faithful. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, given all of that, we have some language that has been a bit of a kind of a problem sometimes. He's spoken of as upon his return to heaven, the heavenly realms, of stepping in behind the curtain. And the word that's used there is a neuter noun. When we see all the occurrences of that word in the Old Testament, in the Septuagint, the Greek translation, it apparently, it looks like it always refers to the curtain between the holy and the most holy place. And sometimes those of us who have a particular understanding of Jesus' work as the atoning high priest, as a particular ministry that begins at a particular point in time, we've sometimes had that verse here of chapter 6:19 kind of thrown at us as a way of saying, look, he's behind the curtain already from the very beginning. And yet, we need to notice that throughout the rest of this book, where that word appears repeatedly, when it clearly means into the most holy place, it's referred to with the modifier of the second veil. Here it's simply the curtain, the veil, which the holy part of the sanctuary had a veil across the front of it, a curtain apparently as well. So that's been a kind of a sore point of debate between various branches of Christianity. I don't want to spend undue time in it, but if there's any way we can shed a little light on that, it might be helpful to our viewers.
Well, I think it's important with the book of Hebrews and with any book of the Bible to let it speak to us in its own terms.
Yeah.
We have our questions, but it may not be answering the questions that we raise. Okay. And I think part of and there have been arguments over these verses, sometimes bitter arguments over chapter 6, 19 and 20, about which apartment, which curtain, which veil, back and forth. As I have read through the book, and remember, this will be elaborated in chapters 9 and 10, I think what Hebrews is telling us is that Christ has removed all barriers between heaven and earth, between God and us. That is the great message.
Right.
And if we bring in some other theological questions that it may not answer, they may be legitimate questions, but maybe we need to go elsewhere in Scripture to find the answers to those. I think the book of Hebrews is very important in theology and in Adventist theology. It talks about the reality, the heavenly sanctuary, about Christ ministering on our behalf. It stresses unhindered access to God, that his atonement is complete and full. Okay, once for all he died. He doesn't die over and over again. These are the great ideas. And on these ideas, the writer is saying, you can take it to the bank. Stake your eternal future on Jesus. And some of the other questions that we may have, we may find answers or partial answers in Hebrews. I think we do. But we don't find a full-blown theological development of some of the questions that we may bring to the text.
When I have taught this book repeatedly over the years, I have said to my students, the Epistle to the Hebrews makes place for Christ's priestly ministry, for sure, but it does not spell out all of the details or answer all of the questions that we might bring to the text. I'm sorry, Leo.
No, the other thing that I think is important to note is that the contrast between the Levitical priesthood and Christ's priesthood is ongoing here, right?
Oh, yeah.
With the Levitical priesthood, those were priests who were flawed, who needed to offer sacrifices for the people as well as for themselves. Christ's priesthood is along the lines of Melchizedek, and he is, as you've noted here, the priest king. And his priesthood is far superior to that of the Levitical priesthood. So that motif, he clearly wants to continue on and show the superiority of Christ's Melchizedekian priesthood.
Anything else before we move on from this close of chapter 6?
I think the other thing I'd like to note is in verse 20. Sometimes, you know, when we're, all the things we've noticed about the inside the veil and what have you, let's not forget that little motif there where Jesus has entered as a forerunner. Forerunner on behalf of us, right? And so here again, he's spoken about Abraham as a model of faithfulness, but now here's the ultimate model of faithfulness, Jesus, who has gone through this pilgrimage and thrown on high at the majesty on high, and he is our forerunner, our model, an example to emulate for perseverance, faithfulness, and steadfastness.
It's an idea that he picks up a number of times. In chapter 2, he talks about Jesus as our, well, the Greek word is archegos. He's the leader, like the pathfinder, the one who blazes the trail.
Pioneer, right?
Here, and here is the forerunner. It's a different word, but same idea. Chapter 12, he's the author and finisher of our faith, okay? And it comes back to the same word, archegos, again. So it's the idea that, yes, we're pilgrims on the way to the better land, but Jesus has gone before us, okay? He knows the way, okay? He understands. And if we keep our eyes fixed on him, we'll make it.
So we've been reading with furrowed brow a little bit here in the first part of chapter 6, puzzling over what it has to say about our spiritual pathway and our walk in Christ. But really, even though there are some difficult moments in that opening paragraph of chapter 6, really the focus is not on us or our struggles or our faithfulness or otherwise. It's on Jesus. And that's the ultimate answer, finally. But what we do see here, it seems to me, is a pastor with a yearning, burning heart for his people. Who just can, and I think that's what drives him to even state this the way he does. Don't fall back. It's dangerous. That's really what he's trying to say, isn't it? But then he immediately turns to uphold the good that's before us and uphold the good that's behind us on which we're building. You know, the promise is there, but it's a promise that that precedes us with Abraham. You are well located, you're grounded both in the past and in the future. And again, I'm going to mention, I think, a particular vision in a little book called Early Writings, in which Ellen White has her first vision. And there is light from behind, and there's light up in front. And there's that kind of double assurance. I think the imagery is very similar to what we have here. Anything else on 6?
I just love be imitators of those who inherit the promises.
Oh, yeah.
Guess how? Through faith and steadfastness.
Yeah.
That's anticipating chapter 11.
It so is.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
Those great heroes of faith we're going to read about.
Succession of great men and women who trusted
Which
God.
gets at the pilgrimage motif
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the journey,
Yeah.
which comes through so strongly.
Then there is we end up, of course, with the high priest again.
Yeah.
And the role of the high priest is to represent the people to God. And the apostle here is assuring his congregants that our representative is Jesus. Now, in other places, we know about that Jesus is judge, but he's also our representative. He is on our behalf.
Yeah.
And we're beginning to learn of some of the solid food that they have been ignoring, that there are some enormous promises that they have not entered into, that they have not come boldly to the throne of grace and such matters. So clearly all that we've gone through is leading us to this point as we see, and now it's about to all open up. Next time we begin to see this surprising mention of a high priest who was the first one mentioned in the Bible, not Levi, and he has none of the weaknesses and all of the strengths that his experience brings to it.
Yeah.
And as you make the list of all the things that he says about the high priesthood of Jesus Christ, it seems to me what he's also doing is telling his audience, folks, perhaps there are no greater spiritual resources available to you that can come from the Jesus who is our high priest.
Yeah.
So boldly come to the throne of grace,
right.
because everything you need, you will find there.
Yeah.
It seems odd to have the juxtaposition and the confluence of all these titles. Jesus as king, sacrifice, as priest, as judge.
Exactly.
But when you stop to think of it, whom else would we rather have as the judge than the priest, right?
All right.
Who has, and the sacrifice, it's all bound up there together, and there really is the secret of our security, isn't it?
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. Exactly.
It's that, finally, it's that convergence. The idea of Messiah was a rich one, wasn't it, in ancient Hebraic thought, and down into New Testament times and beyond. But some people saw the Messiah as king, some as a conquering military figure, some as a teacher of righteousness. But ultimately, the effectiveness, the efficaciousness of that comes precisely in the convergence of all of those titles, because they represent a merging of all of those functions. And to work, they all need to work together, don't they?
Yep.
And so here we are, once again, inviting you to join us again next time as we unpack this further, searching for answers.